Hey everyone, JSD Cool here, and welcome to another episode of Coolcraft Season 6. I just realized my volume was muted that entire time. In the last episode, I spent most of the time working on the Nether Hub here, which has, well, it hasn't changed all that much, but it still, I think, holds up being the map of the city. Of course, JSD Cool, though, has actually built a Nether portal out here for his base, and that means I should definitely build one of mine. Additionally to that, though, JSD Cool's also built this little offshoot of the tunnel down here towards something that we might check out a little bit later in this episode. Of course, I also built the parking lot here outside my storage system, or at least got a good start on it. In this episode, I am going to be building a farm which you've probably seen on the thumbnail. It's inside of these shulker boxes right now and will be placed right here. But first, I am going to link myself up to the Nether. Alright, right in the corner of the soon-to-be expanded parking lot, I have installed what is currently the Nether portal, but will hopefully also be a subway station soon, although how long that takes is totally dependent on JSD Cool, but this is where it's going to go. But yeah, we just simply link up to the Nether right here where this portal would, be expected to go. Visually the same location on the map as in the overworld. Now on to the main focus of this episode, which is, of course, building the farm that will go right here. So, with that being said, let's get into a time lapse of this thing's construction, which will probably take a fair amount of time. Alright, that only took like 5 hours of building. To be fair, this is the first time I built this in survival because I actually designed this thing all by myself in creative. And we will go into creative in a little while so I can go over bits about this design. But yes, well, I really should explain what this is now in case you didn't read the title or something like that. This is a cherry tree farm. That is the cool and, like, yes, this is the fully worked out. I mean, yes, there are smaller designs that use significantly less redstone and complexity, but hey, I designed this. I do need to build a blast chamber for this thing. I also just want to comment on, like, how difficult, I mean, it was months ago when I built this, or designed this, but I just want to comment on how difficult it was to actually be able to fit everything in for this design, because if you, I mean, looking under here, you can see redstone is quite tightly packed. It was actually really hard to end up running all these lines successfully, but I managed to make it work. So speaking of which, let's hop into creative mode right now, where I can actually explain this design and the design process a little bit more in detail. Welcome to the creative world here, where I designed this, and I'm going to take you through the entire design process, just like, ignore everything that's around us here. So it started with this, which is a, I believe, cherry tree. Oh, here it is. Rayworks' a cherry tree or shitty cherry tree farm. Yes. So this was the original thing I checked out and was like, wow, this kind of sucks. Because yeah, it just kind of does. It's very not interesting. So I then decided to go through the process of making my own. It started over here, and to be clear, these this caution blocking came a little bit later. But I just spam grew a ton of cherry trees in one place just to see what the shape of it would be. And as you can see, we got this shape with the leaves right here, and then we also have these corner areas where there is nothing. That comes back later. So that was the first bit, and so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this, paste it over here, and just remove all the leaves. Now, I do have these extra leaves here to show where the leaves kind of extend out to. But as you can see, this is the basic log structure of the cherry trees. And so I was like, okay, cool. I just have to deal with this. So my first thought was like, I'll just make a giant wall of pistons that just pushes this stuff over, where it's like longer in the middle. It'll just like push more into the end wall, and then we'll just figure out pushing everything over, and it'll be great. And then in the process of making this wall, I realized there's no real easy way for me to connect this stuff or make it work without breaking if there just wasn't a log in a specific place. So I kind of canned that idea. So then I came over here and started growing the trees, and I had ended up noticing something. When a cherry tree grows, its logs only ever extend in one specific axis. So either like this way or this way. It never does both at once, which means there's only a single like line of logs that we ever have to deal with, which basically significantly simplifies the process of only having to push in one direction instead of just a giant wall to blanket cover everything. So with that, I just had to figure out, okay, how do I actually detect which direction the tree grew in so we don't have to push in both directions at once? And so I settled on a design of this stuff here. So this is a little known technique. If you put two daylight sensors together like this, you will, and you cover this daylight sensor, they specifically have to be inverted, then actually I could show you over here, then it will trigger and extend this, or it'll actually output a redstone signal. And you can use this to detect when there's a block above above an area, or if you were thinking another way, you could also use this to transmit a redstone signal very far down very quickly with basically nothing but a shaft that is exposed to the sky for most of the time. So I set up this little test here, and I found that it mostly worked. However, I did have to have a sensor on each side, as I think this here will clear that. Yes, we'll just activate this here and see if I get it. So this here is the type of tree that I had to make sure that I could deal with. You see, instead of extending out in both directions like the larger trees do, this only extends out this direction, which is quite a challenge to deal with, as obviously it's not activating this data sensor, and of course this could be rotated any direction. So I had to make sure to put all four of these in, and it just so happened that they could be put at the perfect distance where they would activate when a tree grew out in their direction, because this is actually a larger one that only extends in a single direction. There are smaller ones that barely reach this daylight sensor, which is why they're at the position that they are. They're here so they can detect it, but they're also far enough out where they won't detect a tree growing in the other axis. So that was one of the big challenges. Now that I had a method for detecting when a tree grew, and specifically which direction it grew in, it was time to start actually putting some stuff together to actually move the logs out of the tree area. So I started actually by constructing this base, and then also some of the redstone logic down below here, which we'll go over in a minute. But one of the important things I had to do was actually design the system to actually push all the trees out, and for that I turned to a flying machine. Now, this actually took me a while to design, but I did eventually land in a functional design here, where I had to cover some of these side observers so leaf updates didn't break the machine. But yeah, the, I guess, star of the attraction is right back here. This is a self-returning flying machine. Here's the design built in a different axis. I got this somewhere from like a YouTube thumbnail. I don't remember where, but I did not design that part. But I did design the rest of this, which is this wall of pistons, which can go straight until, actually, I can just show you. It is that simple. I can simply show you. So it gets activated by the observer there. Anything that's in front of it will just get pushed forwards until it runs into this wall, where then just automatically retracts itself. I, of course, then took this system over here and integrated it into the platform. And this was like my initial platform design here. We just had a giant iron platform. We had these corners marked out because this is like where the leaves didn't need to go anymore. And then we, of course, had holes for all the daylight sensors, which, in order to, you know, make sure everything fit and whatnot, I had to move the daylight sensors back a fair bit so that they didn't conflict with other things. There's also this hole here where you're intended to stand. The fence gate prevents any water that may be flushing by from causing issues for you, and there are two bone meal dispensers here. Actually, if we go look at the redstone, the activation system down here extends this piston, which will then connect the circuit for this latch here. When this latch is in the ready position, which it is right now, it'll activate the yellow circuitry here, which to start it with, actually turns on the clock so that a tree can grow. But then also prepares for when one of the daylight sensors gets activated. When one of these sensing circuits get activated, the corresponding orange circuit activates, which will then trigger, whatever, the corresponding flying machine, and also at the same time turn this latch here at the bottom off. Simultaneously with the activation, there's also a pulse sent up here to actually push the dirt up so we can eject the log that would be otherwise in the ground to allow it to be pushed around. Then once the flying machines return, they activate the cyan circuit here, which reactivates this latch. Now that I had this system working, the next challenge was actually handle the logs that got spit out on the edges here, because there were a fair amount of them and we actually had to get them to a state where we could push them into a blast chamber instead of just, blowing them up right here. The process of doing that was actually quite challenging, as I had to design a system that would adequately work for compacting the logs. So my first attempts was over here, where I tried to just have this line of pistons that would push all the logs down into a piston conveyor, but would be slowly pulsed with lines from the back here. That way we could push it down one block, let all the pistons fire stuff off, then push it down again and again and again. But I could never get this to quite be reliable enough. I then decided to try some other similar methods by using a piston feed tape to actually control when stuff was going up and down, but again, that didn't really work all that well. Eventually landed on this monstrosity, which is actually a portion of a design I stole out of a mango tree farm, which I've built in the past, specifically Season 3, and Jaredy Cool's been building it basically ever since. The key idea with this system is that it's basically a piston conveyor that will just one at a time extend all these pistons, pushing down, pushing all of the logs, or any block really that happens to be its way, down into the piston feed streams that go down below. Also, another key tenet of this design is fairly compact, so I could stack two of them next to each other like this, because I didn't actually mention this before, each cherry tree can have up to 9 logs horizontally from any single tree that's grown, and I did measure that around here. So we had to be able to deal with that. So having 2 of these that could be like a single module compactly put together like this was really good. And then I also connected them like this so that only one would run at a time. I did try running them both at the same time, and that caused issues. So we're not going to do that. I then came over here and integrated the push-down system into the thing on both sides, because that was another challenge. I had to build all the stuff twice because of the 2 directions. I could theoretically have blocked the trees from going in a specific direction, but that seemed inefficient and would have made this significantly less impressive. Now, I did say there were 9 blocks that could possibly be in a row of the tree, but there are only 5 of these devices on each side. And the reason for that is I realized that, first of all, I had to manipulate the blocks a bit so we didn't reach the push limit from just the pistons. So we had to bend a couple corners here. And also that was because otherwise we would start having clearance issues with the second machine over there. But I realized, because we're going to have to push the blocks over to actually feed them into the machine, we have a gap of 4 blocks in here that can be filled. So as long as we trigger these things to push over and start the first push down, after 4 blocks have been pushed in, we can store the remaining 5 blocks in the end and inside of these gaps here while we wait for the first push down to complete, which is how the system works. Major resource saving. The way that the actual push down system works here is that, first of all, down here we have a counter that will count to 4. Once the 4th item has been pushed in, it will of course push all the blocks over into their proper ending stations and start the push down. And of course, if we don't have 4 blocks that get pushed in, because that does happen, once the flying machine reaches the end, it will activate a system which triggers a push down if one hasn't already started. And the order that things get pushed down, it goes as so. It goes this module first, then this module, then we hop over to this one, then this one, and then this circuit here checks if we have more than 4 blocks pushed in. If we have more than 4 pushed in, it will then start this cycle all over again, going back to here. However, if we don't have more than 4 pushed in, it will then simultaneously trigger the last push down section here, as well as trigger this section here for reset. At this point, it doesn't look too bad under here, as we only have really the cyan line going here. We also have this reset thing, which makes sure that the entire farm cycle doesn't start again until both the pushdowns that over here have finished and whatever flying machine was out has fully returned. Sometimes those happen simultaneously, sometimes one happens before the other. Whichever one is not necessarily defined. Also, this here was just a test system so I could tell which side was pushed last. We can now move on to the final design here, which finished incorporating everything that we actually have. So, a key thing was actually the water streams that push all the items towards the center. Those were added here in this revision, as well as finishing up all the circuitry underneath here, which, I mean, over this side is okay, but we have these hoppers here which kind of make it hard to build anything in. But around the rest, it is now incredibly dicey and hard to work around here. And the thing that mostly makes this a pain here is well, besides the redstone we already had to do the redstone to trigger the water here, which the green circuit here is what actually activates it, but the blue circuit is what's responsible for deactivating it, which is, of course, when the flying machine reaches the end, that's what deactivates it. So we had to snake both of those lines in here. We also have the system to deliver items to the player once they've been picked up by these hoppers. The dropper here is just pulsing constantly, but in order to actually allow the player to pick some items up, we have this pink circuit here, which is responsible for pulse locking this hopper here so that the player can actually pick up items sometimes, but then the hopper can also deal with stuff. And then, of course, we have that storage down there. Of course, something I didn't mention beforehand, though, is we have this green, I guess you could call it, circuit on the underside here, which is responsible for actually taking all the items and pushing them into one final item stream out here, which goes to a blast chamber. Hopefully that was a satisfactory explanation of how this farm design works, if not a long-winded one. Yeah, now let's, I guess, get building of the blast chamber, because that's kind of important. Alright, I dug a hole here for where the blast chamber is going to go, and that's specifically the blasty part of the blast chamber. Everything else is hopefully going to be above ground. Blast chamber has finished construction, hopefully at least. Have not tested it, as with all the stuff, and it's surely to break first try, but yeah, also hopefully that fence gate doesn't get exploded by the TNT. Otherwise I'll need to make this deeper. Now it is time for me to actually get to testing. Also, I put a roof in here over the AFK point so that I don't get phantomed, or realistically lightninged either, but that could still happen, I guess. I've loaded a bunch of bone meal into the system here. I basically should get more to fill that up, but I need to now get, well, a cherry sapling. That should not be too difficult. I somehow don't have one, but yeah, there's a few trees over here in downtown that could provide me with all what I need. Alright, so I've done a couple test runs, and it does, for the most part, appear to be working, as we have stuff getting pushed over, and stuff triggering, but I did notice a slight issue. First of all, the water over here stopped going down, and then both sides were sometimes activating at the same time. I haven't had enough time to debug that, but more importantly, I realized that because this block wasn't here initially, yeah, some of the redstone got washed out. Well, that's not good. Like, not good at all. Which means I need to put a block in on the other side, so... I have now been running this farm for a short while, but we have filled up most of these push down stations now have actually pushed at least something down, and we have actually gotten to the point where the first explosion has gone off in the blast chamber. And that has me realizing I didn't build a storage system for this. That's a decent amount of wood just from the first blast alone. Yeah, I guess I should now build a storage system for this then, eh? Okay, so I just got back after AFKing for a while, and noticeably the farm appears to be broken here. This hasn't retracted, but that has. And, yeah, it's not exactly correct. I thought this might happen. Okay, so, first of all, I'm just gonna say, I really should implement that kill switch mechanism that I was thinking. So basically, I had actually prototyped it out here. Basically, I had a line of leaves that were next to this area in a place that logs should never come in contact with, to be kind of like my emergency stop. So if logs ever did come in contact with the leaves, they'd update an observer, because leaf stone, which would trigger the farm to stop doing stuff. I haven't done that because I just never got around to implementing that, and it was working. But clearly something got screwed up here. But what? I am not too sure. doesn't look like... Oh, let's go to spectator mode. Okay, I was about to say it doesn't look like any of the pushdowns broke, but nope, they did. This one particularly did. And this thing somehow kept pushing that straight for a while. That's impressive. But clearly it broke eventually. Oh, this one's also broken. The thing is, I have no clue how any of this broke. I should have been replay recording at the time, but definitely wasn't. Is this side fine? You see, this is the problem with these things. They'll just suddenly break for no apparent reason. Besides, I guess, you looking at them wrong. Actually, let's go check out the blast chamber. I think everything's fine over here. Don't see anything extending where it's not supposed to, so that's good. It's just this and this appear to have broken. That's it. It could be worse, to be fair. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure how this happened, but I was fixing this and this pushdown station, and somehow one of the pistons from over here ended up being over here somehow. I have zero clue how it happened, but I was one piston short over here and one piston over on this side. It just makes no freaking sense. Anyhow, alright, I've put in an emergency shutoff system, although I appear to have missed this one. Interesting. But anyhow, yes, I put in an emergency shutoff system using leaf stone in a few different places. Here I also use this daylight detection daylight sensor vertical redstone system once again here. And basically all this does is when any of these leaf stone sections trip, it's a pulse that can only happen once to activate, it will shut this torch off here. And this here, if you remember, is kind of like the system reset circuit that will trigger once both the pushdown has finished and, of course, the flying machine is returned. But of course, this torch being off means it will never actually reset. So that's what this has targeted, and hopefully this works. It didn't take very long, and something has already tripped again. Yes. Yes, this does not look right. This is what just gave us a problem there. But, as you can see, this did get a little bit out of whack, but it did stop before it did stop the whole farm before any serious damage was done. Thanks, though, to this log down here. Alright. Let's just make sure no other damage was happening. And I don't think it did because of how this tripped here. Which is good. Thank goodness for this. So, as you can hear, I installed an alarm to tell me when the emergency stop system here has been activated. There's also this light, so I can visually see it when my audio is off. And yeah, as you can hear, it did trip again, and I'm guessing, yeah, it was back here. But I tried to do a thing because I did a replay recording, and it seemed like there was an issue where this last piston here wasn't properly retracted, or was getting retracted then extended again. So I put in a stopgap solution here, and yeah, it doesn't appear to have fixed it. So I'm gonna quickly disable this alarm because it's getting annoying. So clearly my stopgap solution did not quite work out over here, and I'll have to do more replay recordings to try to diagnose what the actual issue is, because I actually have no freaking clue. But anyhow, I realized that I haven't actually shown the farm operating at all at the moment. So might as well just on camera here, flick the lever and watch the whole thing activate. So flying machine goes, water spills to take any drops in. Stuff gets pushed over into this area. Push down starts with the sequence that I mentioned earlier. And then capped off here at the last one. And it didn't break just then in front of us. So yeah, that's the system with this farm, and hopefully I can get it working. But I don't think I'm going to show this anymore in this episode. Earlier in the episode, I did mention that there was this thing Jared Cool had been working on down here in the Nether, and I think I will now show what exactly that is. Jared Cool has been working on an ice boat racetrack that he intends to have us, the people who play on the server, actually race in at some later unspecified date. Now, that's pretty cool, and I've, done some practice laps and stuff, handling the boat pretty well. But, the track is pretty long and bland, and, notably, there's no advertisements littered anywhere, so I think we should, put some sort of advertisement along the side of the route. Alright, so here's the first little one that I've built up here, and as you can see, it's basically just supposed to be a billboard that's a CBI, but it's, you know, right on this big old glacier here, which you'll see right as you come down this way. Now let's go put another one somewhere else. Alright, I've installed the second billboard that I'm going to do around this corner here. Okay, I have the boat in my inventory, thank goodness. Yeah, it's, there's a big old frozen lake here. You can see a big old arrow saying you go this way around it. And yeah, now just on the inside of the curve as you're going by, you'll see this billboard. I realize I'm not advertising anything in specifics, but with all that being said, this episode has been surprisingly long for the fact that I was actually quite busy this week doing stuff. But so I'm gonna have to say thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Check out my game, which is linked in the description, and I will see you all in the next episode of Coolcraft Season 6. Bye!